Good morning, Bliss Lovers. It is Rebecca Davison here, intuitive coach and mentor, founder of the Intuitive Life Academy. Welcome to the Find Your Bliss show here on Plains FM. Big thank you to everybody in regards to their birthday wishes last week. I very much appreciate that. I had an amazing day. Revealed to my tribe that I actually ended up receiving a telescope, which I am hugely excited about. So I get to see the stars with more clarity, which is super fun. So welcome to today's show. Today what we're going to be talking about is the healing power of being a good listener. And this is one huge element of my work, but it's really curious to me because it often seems like a lot of people don't understand the value of being a good listener. And it's often, again, something that we're not taught, and how this can have a huge impact on whether people feel heard, received, understood, and also ultimately witnessed and healed. So, and I know, right, there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, you know, we're not broken, so we don't need to be healed. We just need to be letting go of a lot of things. And that's totally true, but there's a lot to be said for being able to listen effectively. Now, and true listening is an act of love. When you are able to be present with somebody in that way, it is an extremely loving gesture. So if you're interested in your relationships going to the next level of intimacy, going into a deeper space of connection, really feeling safe. You know how many people come and see me and they don't feel safe? That's probably because they haven't had a lot of people in their life who have known what it is to truly listen to them. So I'm really excited to explore this topic today. It's it's a huge thing because people underrate it, but it is so incredibly powerful and transformative. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. It's so incredibly powerful and transformative. So let's look at what makes a good listener. So, and I also too, just take a moment to kind of tune in to what it feels like. I don't know if you've hopefully had the experience of when you have somebody's undivided attention, right? You know without a shadow of a doubt that they're not sitting there thinking about themselves, right? They're totally emotionally available and present for you in that moment. They're truly listening to what it is that you're saying. They are receiving the words that you are saying. They are identifying and witnessing your emotions. You know, even talking about it, you can feel within that it's so powerful to be witnessed that way, to have somebody go, I see you and I hear you and I'm right here with you in regards to what it is that you are emotionally experiencing. And, you know, there's often, discernment is really important when it comes to listening, because sometimes discernment is knowing not to say anything, to just listen to that person. Now, I had an amazing evening last night because I ran kind of a little experiment, which was called Be With Your Feelings. Because there's one thing that I've noticed with intuitive development that people often, when they're first starting especially, they get really tripped up on, and that's their emotions. It's like they can't, you need to, if your emotions are kind of up in your face and in your grill, you're not going to be able to create that calm space to move beyond that into more intuitive guidance. So this is a big key thing in regards to accepting yourself as a human, knowing that we all have emotions, understanding what your emotions are, a guidance system to support you, rather than feeling like you're at their mercy or you're a bad person. If you feel bad, right, knowing that emotions are energy and motion, so they will move through your energy field, your body being the densest part of your energy field, but really learning what it takes to witness and be present to them. Because that, of course, is an act of self-love, to be able to show up for ourselves and witness our own emotions. And it was a pretty spectacular evening because there were 8 women there. I think there were only 2 people who actually had met each other maybe once before. So it was a room basically full of strangers in my home, but it was incredible. Because these women, because again, it's really important to me to always create a sense of safety. They all trusted me to be there. but to create a space where they could drop down quickly and deeply into being seen and witnessed in their emotions. And of course, it can be pretty intimidating for a lot of people to go, I'm going to go and be present in front of people I don't know and be vulnerable, right? Allow myself to really be seen and perhaps even express emotion, whether that's in the form of anger or tears or hurt. That's an incredibly vulnerable space, and there needs to be an energy of safety to be able to do that. I think also one of the really powerful things about the evening as well is women realizing that they're not alone, right? They're not isolated in the way that they're feeling, that there are other people out there who are feeling exactly the same way. And often there's always a really interesting kismet kind of a synchronicity, law of synchronicity gets activated, because often when people come together in circles, there will be people who've had similar experiences, which was definitely the case. And of course, when somebody's been through an experience that you're experiencing, it can be really validating, confirming, and affirming. So it was a really magical evening in regards to going, what does it take for us to be present to our emotions, to then be able to move forward into moving beyond that, which is to move into that space of getting your intuitive guidance. Because intuitive guidance, if you've got your emotions kind of all over the place, you're not going to be able to hear it. You're not going to be able to tune in and know what true guidance is. You're going to be stuck in those spaces of like, is this my emotion? Is this my fear? Or is this my intuition talking? Like, that's often a big question that I get as an intuition coach, which is, how do I know if it's my fear or my intuition? And you'll feel the difference in frequency, because even though, because fear, if you're feeling it, again, this is why we need to be so discerning with our emotions. The thing that I would always recommend from a different perspective is to run towards your fear and investigate it, because it's going to show you something, and more often than not, it is an illusion. But you'll feel the frequency. I know that sounds kind of bizarre, but it will come from a different place. Often I get people to go, okay, well, where is the fear coming from? Is it coming from, when you're thinking about the fear, where do you feel it in your body? And that's often, if it's an illusion-based fear, it's often in the head, right? So even being able to identify the location of it, because it's coming from a thought process rather than actually your intuition. And the interesting thing is, in my experience, my intuition's never really gone, I don't know, it's interesting to kind of tune into that, because it's never really gone, if it's been in my highest and best interest, it will actually push me towards things that are fearful, right? As opposed to going, don't do that. So, I think it's also about flipping it and looking at it from a different perspective. But that's kind of a whole different story. We're talking about healing and the healing power of listening. So some of the first things to identify, and I spoke to a friend about this just recently, right, that we can't witness other people's pain, or we can only witness other people's pain to the extent that we have done it for ourselves. So even last night I was saying to the ladies, right, even seeing somebody else in distress or discomfort will make you feel uncomfortable often, because there can be often parts of us that if we're not feeling received by other people, it can make us feel kind of grabby, right? We want to grab people's attention, we want their focus, we want their validation. But again, often that comes back to your relationship with yourself. Are you actually being present to yourself? Are you listening to yourself? Are you witnessing yourself? We don't get taught how to be with our emotions. So when we find somebody who can listen to us, we can often be like, whoa, that person feels like sunshine to me, because they are being with me, they are loving me, they are present with me. So one of the first things we need to learn to do to be a good listener is to actually move out of our own field of reality. So what does that mean? That means that when you're listening to somebody, you're not thinking about your shopping list. You're not allowing your attention to be pulled in a different direction. You have learnt what it is to be present. And this can often be a big thing for a lot of people, because life is really busy. There is a huge amount of distraction out there. which is ironic too, because of course when we start developing our intuition, we go into perception rather than thought processes, and we can have more space to be more present to other people. So it's kind of like it's a reciprocal process. The more we can be present, the more we can be present to our own intuition, the more we can actually be emotionally available to other people. But if you've got, unprocessed emotions, if you've got stuff going on, it's probably going to be difficult for you to really hear other people. And if other people are expressing pain, you can end up getting triggered, right? Because you're not feeling received in your own emotions. So checking in and kind of asking yourself, do I think that I'm a good listener? Would people say that about me? Do people feel received by me? Do people feel like I'm there for them? And this is different than just having a lot of people tell you their stuff, right? This is actually being able to energetically receive them into your world. So the first thing you need to do is kind of get out of your own head, right? You need to go and meet that person where they're at. So that doesn't mean, thinking about yourself, thinking about even what you're going to say next. It means a willingness to go beyond your own situation and to go and meet that person where they're at. And then from there, kind of go into what it is that they're experiencing. Now, this is where it can psychically get a little tricky, because we don't want to go into somebody else's energy field or reality as such, but we can observe it, right? We can be present to their intense emotions without actually having to feel it ourselves. Now, a lot of people might argue on this point, but I've just seen it because I work with a lot of empaths, and a lot of empaths, they can't differentiate between their own feelings and somebody else's. And if you haven't learnt that skill set, then you want to be the observer, right, rather than the person who's going in and feeling literally somebody else's pain. It's a surefire way to get exhausted quickly, because this is another thing, right? If we have people around us who are in a lot of emotional pain, if we don't know how to keep our energy clean, we're going to end up feeling exhausted. A lot of people say to me about the work that I do, they're like, oh my goodness, don't you end up feeling really drained? And it's like, no, because I know how to keep my energy clear. I've learned what it is to witness somebody and be present to them and hold space for them, which I could talk about for hours, but without going into their energy and having to drop my vibration to match where they're at. I can be compassionate and loving and kind without having to drop the energy to match that person. That kind of leads a little bit more into codependency, especially if you don't know how to bring your vibration back up again. Hope this is making sense. So to really be able to observe and to love somebody in that moment by really going, I've moved out of my world into yours and I'm here for you. I am loving you. Maybe I don't know what to do. Maybe I don't know what to say, but I'm choosing to be present to what is occurring for you. That is a huge act of love. And it can often be a big hurdle for a lot of people. Like if you're hurting, if you're in pain, have you ever noticed that? You really can't hear other people. And this is something that I have noticed a lot in my work, that some people, it can actually feel damaging to have people around you who can't listen properly. They don't have the ability to move beyond themselves. It comes, and I know there's a lot of labels out there, and I'm not really into labels like a narcissist or being self-centered, etc. But it can feel like that, right? Because that person doesn't have the ability to move beyond themselves to be present to you. And this can feel so damaging to be on the receiving end of it. It can feel disconnecting. You can feel like this can activate massive feelings of guilt for people, where people go, oh my goodness, that person's not hearing me, not receiving me, not valuing me by being present to what it is that I'm experiencing. Talked about this a little bit last night. Of course, it shows up in your intimate relationships, especially between men and women. The comment came up in regards to being told by a man, you're too emotional. because the man's probably feeling overwhelmed by the level of emotion that's being expressed and is choosing to try and shut that person down rather than actually own his own feelings and say, I feel overwhelmed. So really starting to bring greater levels of consciousness to what is actually happening and to be able to learn what it is to hold space, to move beyond ourselves, to be loving enough to get present to where the other person is at. So the other thing that I think is really important to talk to, and people don't do this very well, and that is to hold space. Now, what does that even mean? It sounds kind of like a new world terminology, right? In regards to I'm going to hold space for you. Hold space means I am empty of my own agenda. I am literally, energetically holding energy for you to be seen, witnessed, observed, loved, accepted, cared for. A lot of people check out when it comes to holding space. They don't actually know what it means on a vibrational level. So holding space means that you are focused and present in every moment. When you first start learning how to hold space, it can actually be really tiring. But it is a muscle that you need to flex and get resilience with. Because if you want to have good relationships, right, if you want the people in your life to feel loved by you, you will do the work to be a good listener. You know what it's like when you're talking to somebody and you can tell that you're not part of their reality at all. They just want you to listen to them. Even when they ask you questions and right, and I'm actually, like I do this often with, people who are just wanting to tell me their stuff. I'm not talking about clients, I'm just talking about people in general. And you can tell, right, that it's about them and they have no interest really in what it is. They just want you to receive them because they're only at that level of consciousness. And it's like, it's a turn off, really. It's kind of like, because it stops your relationship from going any further. It stops intimacy when a person makes it all about themselves. It's not reciprocal. And I had a friend once who said to me, I don't know if love is unconditional because if it's not reciprocated, it can't go further. And it was an interesting perspective because I was like, yes and no. Yes, in the respect that you probably are not going to make that choice to spend more time with a person who can't truly listen and hear to you because they're not making it safe for you to be vulnerable. Versus the person who, that you can love unconditionally, but maybe you're doing so at a distance because of that choice, because that's not reciprocal. And I know a few people in my life and world who are terrible listeners, right? They cannot hear. It's just like, and again, because it's like their own pain often is too much that they can't move beyond it to be able to create a conversation. Like a conversation is crossing over between people. It goes back and forward, right? Words show us what the meaning is. So, and often too, if somebody's a really bad listener, it's just one-sided and it becomes pretty boring pretty quick and it can be damaging. So starting to think about this in your relationships, where have you maybe denied somebody because you haven't been able to move out of your own world to go and meet them where they're at? Does it bring up a lot of pain or fear for you to contemplate doing that? Is it maybe bringing you an awareness that it hasn't been easy for you to do that in the past? And again, this isn't about making ourselves wrong ever. It's always about what's my awareness and how can I choose to go beyond that? And I've seen some interesting things too, even in regards to the psychic world, because of course what happens when you're psychic is you can read the energy. So you can see stuff pretty much immediately. And it's almost in some ways like you don't want to hear the person's story because you can actually see what's really up with them. But often people need that element of knowing that they're safe and that they're received. They often want to talk about what is up for them. So it's kind of like a balance often in regards to being able to allow that person to be received and held and loved but also not allowing them to go into a story which is often perpetuating an energy that they're looking to let go of. So it's a balancing act, right? But one of the biggest things that we need to learn as humans is to learn to listen to our own emotions. Like I said before, you're not going to be able to bear witness to somebody's intense emotions if you haven't done it for yourself. And we don't get taught how to do this. You know, even last night in the Be With Your Feelings experiment, watching these amazing women just allowing themselves to go deep, to be present to their emotions, which I was showing them how to do through guided processes, and realizing that they could be present to them and their energy moves and they're okay. You know, one of the big things that happens, right, is we judge ourselves for having an intense or negative, as we may deem it, emotion. And often too, what people can do, because they have awareness of the law of attraction, they go, oh, I'm having a bad thought, or I'm having a bad feeling, so I'm stuffing up my life. Right? No pressure. Instead of actually going, wow, this feeling is part of my emotional guidance system, and it's actually got something really important to tell me. So if I tune in and listen to my feelings and start asking them some questions about what it is that they might want to tell me, then I can help shift the energy. I can be a witness to myself. And that's a very honouring process. That's how we learn to listen to ourselves. The more you do that, the more you can be present to your own emotions. And I get it, I know, it can be really full on, right? Be the person who's like, hey, you want to feel your feelings? Because some people have spent a lifetime avoiding them. You know, this is often the root of all addiction, is the willingness or the need to change our state. We want to get to that place where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too painful, so I'm just going to reach for the drugs or the cigarettes or the alcohol or the shopping or the sex or whatever it is, whatever the addiction, because addiction's transferable, right? It can show up on all different things. To be the person who's going to grab that thing externally to consume, digest, whatever, to help me change my state. And because that's going to give me relief from these feelings that I'm avoiding, because you know what happens, right? The feeling gets more intense. If the feeling's not being looked at, not being processed, it's like the big monster behind the door. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger in our imagination. And also energetically, it can feel like more and more pressure. And it's not that the universe is beating you up, right? It's the universe trying to get your attention to say, hey, something needs to change here. This is not in alignment with the truth of who you are. So the universe will use contracted energy in the form of emotions that kind of make you feel like us to get your attention to go, okay, something needs to be explored. And often too, when people continue to ignore their emotions, it'll end up getting trapped in their body. It ends up creating dis-ease. So coming back into alignment with truth is the process of going, okay, what's going to take for me to come back into alignment with the truth of who I am, and to feel all my emotions, to know that all my emotions, all of them, are a gift from the universe in regards to guiding us. If you just felt good all the time, you wouldn't have any contrast. You need contrast to point you in the right direction. If it feels good, you're on track. If you're not feeling good, something is out of alignment, and it's looking to be returned to truth, which again is why it's so important to become a good listener of our own feelings of emotions, so therefore we can move beyond ourselves to go and meet people at their own. So the first step really is to move beyond yourself to be a good listener. The second step is to be present to that other person's reality. Right? You can't really ever understand what it's like for another person. Right? But you can do your best to witness them. You can be at the edge of their reality and endeavour to look through their eyes and see it the way they are seeing it. You know, maybe something's happened, like maybe somebody's missed a job promotion. So taking the opportunity to actually really meet that person where they're at and go, wow, that must have been really painful for you. Or this is why intuition's so important, right? To be able to read the energy and understand why it was so upsetting for that person. You know, maybe it was upsetting for that person because they missed out on a creative opportunity, rather than the fact that they wanted the glory of being promoted. Do you know what he means? But so when we can actually speak to that person's real pain and acknowledge it, it can be such a transformative experience for people because they feel seen, honoured, witnessed. And witnessing is incredibly healing. So being willing to see what's happening for that person through their own eyes. And again, intuitives, right, can feel that immediately. If you're empathetic, right, you feel that immediately. And there's a caveat here, of course, I just spoke to previously, which is you don't want to go into that person's energy field. You know, we had a realization that there was one person so empathetic last night that she kind of does that naturally. But learning what it is to be the observer, so you don't, you're not packing up that person's energy or using your body to try and process pain for other people, which is often a good thing in regards to, you know, having an awareness of that in regards to boundaries. Super important, you know, and this is one thing as humans that we need to learn to let other people do, is to deal with their own stuff. We can't use our body energy field because we end up feeling exhausted, resentful, frustrated, annoyed that people aren't shifting or changing, rather than actually going, you know what, that's not mine, so I'm going to let it go. I trust that you can figure it out. I trust that you have the awareness to be able to deal with it. That leads into a whole other conversation about expectations in regards to how people are showing up, right? Especially in intimate relationships, like romantic relationships. If your partner's struggling with something, right, and you're getting frustrated because they seem to be stuck, you know, how do you support people in that process without going into the expectation that they should shift, move, heal, change, or without trying to take their energy into your body and help them transmute it? Again, being very aware of your own boundaries. I've talked a little bit about boundaries before. It amazes me that people don't even recognize that word. You know, an energetic boundary is being able to be in your own field of influence and really be happy no matter what, because you're very aware of what you're allowing into your own field of influence. You know, somebody's energy, somebody's words, thoughts, or comments. You know, if they're not in alignment with you, your values, and what you stand for, why are you allowing that energy into your energy field? Learning to say no to what you don't want and to say yes to what you do want. Super important. So today we've been talking about the healing power of being a good listener, and what we've touched on is to do that you need to move beyond yourself, which can be difficult if you're experiencing pain yourself. You're probably wanting to be received. So learning what it is to become present, a lot of that work is to be present to your own emotions, to witness them, to heal them, to then move into somebody else's world, to be able to see it, like go in energetically, be the observer, right, of what is going on for them, and to be the person who can, you know, bear witness to it and say, wow, I can see it from your perspective. I can see how that might really impact you. I can have compassion for you. And then the other element from there is to really be in the energy of, even if you don't know what to do, but be in the energy of being with that person and that experience. Again, the holding space, the willingness to be there, the willingness to see it from their perspective, the ability to identify what the true pain point is and acknowledge that for that person, which is often an intuitive process, right? To go, wow, you know, I really see that that was painful for you, and to allow that person to be witnessed at a really deep level. Hugely, hugely transformative. So you need to respond, right? You need to be in that space where you're going, I'm there with you in that experience, and even though, you know, you might be going, oh gosh, I don't know what to say, because sometimes it's often intense, even to just be there and hold space, like I'm here for you, and maybe I don't completely understand, but I'm doing my best to be here present with you, and letting that person know, you know, here I am for you, or I see you, or I hear you, can be really soothing things to say to somebody who needs to be heard. So choosing to respond on some level. If you don't say anything and that person actually needs something from you in that moment, it's still going to land as bad listening. So again, it comes back to discernment, knowing what it is that that person needs to be able to kind of shift it. And again, how do we know that? Often by our own experience. What do we need when we're hurting or something's happened that's disappointed us? Or how do we feel received by other people? And even thinking about that, can you remember a time in your life where you felt really received and loved by other people because they were an amazing listener? I've had coaching sessions before, and this is interesting to me too because, I have quite a few people come and see me and they've often been to a counsellor, etc. previously. And again, as a counsellor, you want to have really good listening skills, right? You want that person to feel received. And I get it because sometimes, it's going to depend on where we are at. In our everyday life and world, there will be people who talk at you and you don't want to hear it. And, if you're in a social environment, you have that right and that choice, right? Not to have to hold space for that person to be present to their emotions. However, it depends on the context too. If it's your children, your family, your relationship, you really want to learn these skills. So you always have a choice, but learning, probably one of the best ways to learn, right, is to do this with people that you don't want to listen to. Right, to practice being present, because again, what you're going to be doing is overcoming all the emotions within yourself and know what it is to move beyond yourself to really be present to that other person. And again, that's a massive act of love. And it's also a massive act of love when you don't want to do it, right? That's when it really is loving. It really is loving when you're in that space of choosing to move beyond yourself to be there for the other person. And it's a greater act of love when you don't want to do it, right? When you don't want to move beyond yourself and be free and clear and allow other people to be themselves. And if you have that skill set, you are going to find it easy to make great connections. You're going to find it easy to be in business. You're going to find it easy to be successful. If you think about it, the power of listening is profound. If people, if you think about it, if you have, let's use coach as an example. If you have a coach that you know and you've worked with them and you know that they're a great listener and you feel received by them, you're going to want to go back, or you're going to choose that person over somebody who can't hear you. So really starting to think about where listening or not listening is impacting your life in a big way. And what happens a lot of the time, right? People get busy, busy, busy. Life is busy. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Slow down. One of the suggestions that I gave everybody last night was to ask yourself, how are you feeling on a regular basis? Like literally take some moments to put your hand on your chest, close your eyes, tune in and ask yourself. I used to do this on a regular basis when I was working in banking, right, to kind of keep myself sane, but to be in that space too of honouring my experience. Another little thing is when somebody asks you how you are, go into your body and check in with your body and respond to them from a place of truth, because that is vulnerability. That is the willingness to go, actually, I'm not having a great day today. Especially even if you're in customer service. What's really interesting to me, because I get a few telemarketers at home on the phone, right? And people ring up and they say, how are you? And I'll say, I'm good, thanks. How are you? The number of people who go, it's really nice to be asked that. I'm like, gosh, that's incredible, because people, again, they're not realizing, obviously that person's doing a job, not really listening to them as a human, right? Like identifying that they're a human. They're just being shut down and turned off. And again, this is how we, so a big shout out to all the telemarketers out there who have to have the courage to pick up the phone and call people who are just going to shut them down. Because you know what it feels like, folks, when people shut you down for your emotions. they say, oh, your emotions are too much. You're too emotional, you're too sensitive, your emotions are too big. Right? Again, that person most probably doesn't have the ability to be able to hear you because they haven't been present to their own pain or whatever it is that you're endeavouring to express. Because usually when somebody says you're being too emotional, it's a negative slant, right? It's a way of shaming somebody into shutting up. And it's hugely damaging. As opposed to going, actually, it's okay for you to have all your emotions. Whatever they are, they're just emotions. They're a guidance system. Because often people have huge fear about feeling their emotions. They think that if they feel their emotions, it's going to kill them, right? It's going to be so intense or so painful. But this is where we develop courage and resilience to bear witness to each other. And that's why last night was so magical, to be in a space where women literally coming together, allowing themselves to be vulnerable, because we're connecting to higher frequencies of energy to create a safe space, to allow ourselves to be seen, and then witnessing each other as a wow as their energy moves through them. Incredible, really incredible. So yeah, it's a beautiful process too. It's an act of love to be present to somebody and really truly be there with them as you're listening to them. It's really fascinating to me because, like I said, every time a coconut, when I'm working with a client, it will inevitably come back to the way they're feeling. And we talked a little bit about that last night, about mindfulness, and how mindfulness is really great to help you stop the noise. But where does mindfulness take you? To the mind. Right? Most people, in my experience, actually need to learn to stop living from the head and to make that really scary jump and start living from their body and their feelings. And that is, that's staggering, right? That we live in a society, and you think about it, what has that created for us? This constant focus on the mind, the intelligence, you've got to make it happen, use your rational consciousness to create a life. And we end up disconnected from our bodies, feeling miserable, closed-hearted, working from defense mechanisms just to survive, wondering what the hell is wrong with us because society is telling us the way you're feeling is wrong, as opposed to which is a really big thing in my industry, right? Personal development, intuition, which is you should just feel happy. And then you shame yourself because you're well, I'm not happy, so there must be something wrong with me. And then you stick a label on yourself and tell yourself you're depressed. And then you give that label power, and then it starts ruling your life. And then you start constantly wondering what's wrong with you, and you isolate yourself from other people. Stop asking for help. Stop allowing yourself to truly be seen, honoured and witnessed, to be vulnerable and know that you're just a human, and everybody experiences the full gamut of emotions, from the light to the dark. And if they're trying to tell you that you should just cut off from the dark, they are denying your humanity. Do not listen to people who can say that you just live in perpetual happiness. It doesn't work like that, right? You can clear energy, you can shift your vibration, and you can get really good and strong at being able to be present to your emotions and witness them and have them move through. But there will always be things that challenge you. Your power lies in your ability to how you choose to respond to them, right? Because you can, right? You have total control over your thoughts, which is a mind bender for a lot of people. I raised that question last night, and a lot of people were like, because I said, are you aware that you actually do have control over your emotions? The question was, to what level do you feel that your emotions are created by external events? Because you effectively are choosing how to respond to those events, whether you're aware of your choice or not. And that is how we regain our power, by stepping back into accountability and going, actually, because you think about it, you can go to a party or a situation like that and you can meet two people and they have the same, maybe they've had similar upbringings, but you can say to one person like an innocuous comment and that person will be like, oh yeah, whatever, and the other person can get triggered to hell, right? Because they've taken it in a particular way, they've heard it in a particular way. And again, that might not have been your intention. So even that's another thing to consider when it comes to listening, right? We have our own filters. We have our own things that we're going to go, ow, that was painful. And again, we know we talk about this in regards to our triggers. It's not the other person's being intentionally nasty. It's just something in us that's actually often looking to be healed because we have a false belief about it. That's why it's creating the pain. That's why it's causing the distress and the dissonance. So I hope you can tune in to the idea and feeling, even asking yourself that question, if I listen to myself more, what would that do for me in terms of feeling loved? And we can spend so much time and so much energy running, right? Keeping ourselves busy, not wanting to be present. And this is often why we need to be facilitated. We need to be in a space where we have somebody else there who knows what they're doing in regards to guiding us through our emotions. So we know that that emotion is not going to kill us, because that's what it can feel like, right? If it's really intense, it can feel like that. It can feel like, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming and it's going to take me out. And if you don't know how to move through that process in such a way, it can be really daunting. Your ego is going to sit there and go, don't do that, it's going to kill you. It can feel too much. As opposed to, we talked about that a little bit last night too, the idea of the obstacle, the idea of it, more than the actual obstacle itself. If you're doing the hurdles at school, it's often the idea of the hurdle that kind of psyched you out rather than actually getting in there and doing it. And it's the same with your emotions. It's Joseph Campbell who wrote The Hero's Journey, who said every feeling fully felt is bliss. Every feeling fully felt is bliss. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I would have to agree that some of my most splendid feeling experiences have been incredibly painful. I would say exquisitely painful. Like, you have a deep awareness of exactly how intense and how painful it is in that moment. And I think one of the amazing things about experiencing pain is to really be in the energy of acceptance of it. We talked about words last night, acceptance, welcoming the emotions. But realizing too, to feel that level of pain, it means that you love to that extent. If you're believing that you're experiencing loss, for example, or you're in grief, that will be directly related to how much you care. If you've lost somebody, if you've lost a parent or a loved one, for example, the pain can be so intense. But again, what does it take to turn it up and be with it rather than turn it down or turn it off? Alrighty, so thank you for tuning in, Facebook. I'm just going to say bye for now. I would encourage you guys, if you are listening, if you're not in the tribe already, to go to the Intuitive Life Academy Facebook group and join the group, especially if you're interested in learning more about being present to your feelings and witnessing yourself. So with the intention to move beyond that and develop your intuition. Last night was huge in terms of feedback for me, knowing that, because my guidance has been pointing to this for a while, to actually help people to kind of get on that first rung when it comes to developing their intuition, which is really knowing, honouring, accepting, witnessing, and knowing how to process their emotions so they feel good. If you're interested in manifesting, it's a huge thing, because if we don't know how to feel, process, witness, observe our emotions, we're not going to know how to shift them to be able to get in the vibration that we want to be in order to manifest the life that we want. So yeah, go check out the Facebook group or go to RebeccaDavison.life and sign up for my newsletter so you can make sure that you're kept informed, because I am definitely going to be looking to roll out some live events in regards to this. I'm not quite sure when. I'm not sure if it will happen before Christmas or not, but yeah, stay tuned and check out the Facebook group. Alright folks, thanks for tuning in on Facebook. Bye for now.